Shocker, Buffett bets on Asia. Confirms our trend. In early August, I wrote about how one of the best hedge fund managers of the past 20 years has put a staggering 40% of his fund into stocks in India. That isn't just a bold bet. That's a putting your career on the line bet, which suggests an incredibly high level of conviction. The hedge fund manager I'm talking about is Monish Pabrai. Since founding his fund in 2000, he has generated a cumulative return of 967% for his investors. That performance smashes the 168% that the S&P 500 has produced over the same time period. After doing some sleuthing, I discovered that Pabrai is especially bullish the Indian finance sector, which is essentially still in its infancy and growing incredibly fast. Pabrai's huge conviction bet put the Indian finance sector on my radar. Now, something else has happened that has even further increased my interest. Warren Buffett jumps on this Indian opportunity. Just a few days ago, news broke that Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway had purchased a stake in Paytm, India's largest digital payments company. Like Pabrai, Buffett's investment shows that he sees value in the Indian finance sector. The investment in Paytm is the first ever direct investment in India for Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. As part of the deal, Berkshire's investing lieutenant Todd Combs has joined the Paytm board of directors. That tells us that not only is going to be a long-term holding for Berkshire, but that we can expect Berkshire to increase the size of its investment over time. Even more intriguing, Buffett's Berkshire wasn't the only mega-cap corporation investing in Indian e-commerce/finance in August. Walmart, WMT, closed a deal to acquire a 77% stake in Flipkart, India's largest e-commerce platform, for a smooth $16 billion. That is a big commitment, even for Walmart. The reason for all this interest is the growth that India has in front of it. Fueled by the combination of rising incomes and a surge in the number of people using the internet, Indian e-commerce specifically is about to blast off like a rocket ship. A study by PwC India estimates that the Indian e-commerce market is going to increase fourfold in just 5 years, from $36 billion in 2017 to $150 billion by 2022.1. Keep in mind, we get pretty excited here in North America with 3% GDP growth, but the Indian e-commerce industry is growing at an annualized clip of almost 35%. No wonder Pabrai, Buffett, and Walmart have all jumped on board. Success in business is much easier when you are operating in an industry that has the wind at its back. Indian e-commerce and the Indian finance sector in general don't just have a tailwind behind it, this is more like a Category 5 hurricane. This is your passport to invest in this Indian opportunity. Fairfax India, FFXDF, is a publicly traded company that was formed specifically to take advantage of the opportunity that a rapidly growing India presents. The company was founded by Prem Watsa, who is often referred to as the Canadian Warren Buffett. Watsa has led the Canadian reinsurance company, Fairfax Financial, FRFHF, to an incredible 33-year track record. Today, Fairfax India has made investments in India that are approaching $2 billion. Those investments are focused on giving Fairfax controlling interests in the companies that it has taken a position in. 30% of those investments have direct exposure to the Indian finance sector that Pabrai and Buffett are so bullish about. The other investments include the third largest airport in India, a soda producer and an agriculture finance business. What I love about this is that Watsa is a world-class investor who is applying his skills to a much less efficient market. That is a recipe for success, and I believe it's just the start of more good things to come. Here's to looking through the windshield. Is Trump's tax cut paying for itself? There is absolutely nothing wrong with America's finances that a miracle couldn't fix, as the great man said. We learn this week that 2018's budget deficit currently rises Himalayan high to $895 billion, a 39% increase over last year. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, announced in April that the budget deficit would exceed $1 trillion in 2020. But CBO now estimates the deficit will top $1 trillion in 2019, 1 year ahead of schedule. The reason, Simple as snow and as obvious as the nose on a man's face, the United States government lays out far more money than it hauls aboard. The Republic demands its bread, circuses, its gladiator combats. But it prefers to buy on credit. Defense spending up 10% on the year. Social Security outlays up 5%. Medicare up 7%. Overall federal spending has increased 7% this fiscal year, while tax revenues have increased only 1%. To the business we must add a 25% increase in net interest on the public debt. The economic men in practice at Washington assured us the Trump tax cuts would pay for themselves through higher growth. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, for example, assured us, the plan will pay for itself with growth. Then we come to President Trump's senior economic advisor. Larry Kudlow is a swell enough fellow who is nonetheless trapped in 1981, like a fly trapped in amber. He argues that even the CBO numbers show now that the entire $1.5 trillion tax cut is virtually paid for by higher revenues and better nominal GDP. But if outlays are up 7% while revenues are up 1%, how is the entire $1.5 trillion tax cut being paid for by higher revenues and better nominal GDP? We will gladly take correction if mistaken. But in our court stands economist Greg Mankiw. Mankiw was George W. Bush's chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisers. From whom, I do not know what numbers Larry is referring to. A reasonable rule of thumb, in my judgment, is that about 1/3 of the cost of tax cuts is recouped via faster economic growth. We're heart and soul for tax cuts provided they are twinned with spending cuts to match. There is something within the liver and lights that demands a square accounting. Spend less, it whispers, or more if you must. But pay your way as you go. Borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today is the way of the scoundrel, the profligate, the serial bankrupt. The wicked borrows, and cannot pay back, as Psalm 37:21 reads. But worry not, soothes the official voice, deficits don't matter. And for years they haven't, or not overmuch. But the laws of economics will not be forever conned, the old-timers insist. Actions demand reactions, scales must ultimately balance, the free lunch has no existence this side of paradise. We suspect a great reckoning will prove once and for all that deficits do matter. At writing, the national debt rings in at $21,479,156,738,092, and rising, rapidly. For your viewing pleasure, CBO's projected trajectory of the national debt as a percentage of GDP, the greatest burglars of America's fiscal future? Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, with interest on the debt into the bargain. If you accept the CBO at its word, mandatory spending including these budget busters and a few others will constitute 78% of federal spending by 2026. That leaves only 22 cents per dollar for education, science, transportation, and 100 other priorities, including defense. Former Treasury official Peter Fisher's waggish observation gains currency with each passing year. The federal government, says he, is a gigantic insurance company, with a sideline business in national defense and homeland security. Much truth is spoken in jest. With the spirit of doom upon us today, let us sink further into the mire. According to no less an authority than the United States Treasury, projected tax revenues to fund Social Security and Medicare over the next 75 years fall $46.7 trillion short. Unfunded liabilities, these are called. But even these $46.7 trillion of unfunded liabilities may tell a mere fraction of America's true indebtedness. Economist and Boston University professor Larry Kotlikoff says Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are not fully accounted for in official number crunching. These accounting shell games mask the actual debt, says Kotlikoff. What is America's actual debt? Over the next 75 years, this Cassandra projects America's true debt at an intergalactic $210 trillion. Kotlikoff, shaking his head in despair, we have all these unofficial debts that are massive compared to the official debt. We're focused just on the official debt, so we're trying to balance the wrong books. If you add up all the promises that have been made for spending obligations, including defense expenditures, and you subtract all the taxes that we expect to collect, the difference is $210 trillion. That's the fiscal gap. That's our true indebtedness. Kind heaven, no, could our fair land be $210 trillion in debt? On days such as this, when our hopes for America crash upon the shoals of actuarial mathematics and we wonder why we even bother, our thoughts turn to author Robert Benchley. We have told the tale before, but today we tell it again. Benchley sat at his typewriter one day to tackle a vexing subject. He got one word into it when he came upon a brick wall. The words would not come. He soon threw up the sponge, and abandoned his typewriter in frustration. After soaking his head in the hotel bar, he returned to visit the task anew, freshly inspired. With only one word to work with, the Benchley rapidly hammered out his article, presented here in its entirety: the hell with it.